Welcome to the weekly LinkedIn Live leadership series, Voices of Leadership. Thanks for joining us. I'm Kathy Eastwood, your host and CEO and founder of E equals Y. Each week we explore the fascinating world of leadership, featuring voices across different generations, experiences, industries, etc. Because there's no right way to be a leader. It's all about being authentic and showing up as yourself and delivering results. We always talk about how important it is, and that's why we preach the E3 Leadership Code, making sure that you express and envision, engage your people, execute with precision, all powered by emotional qualities. We'll meet different leaders. We'll find out what drives them, what their unique leadership styles are, and tips and tricks. So, before we get started, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know who's here. Where are you calling in from? This is an interactive conversation. And I'm going to actually put a question out there. What's your favorite season and why? So share in the comments, let us know, and we'll continue to monitor that as we go. But in the meantime, let me introduce to you our guest, Joseph Loria. Joseph isn't just a colleague of mine, he's also a great friend and collaborator. We first crossed paths about 3 years ago, I think it is, Joseph, now, right? And I was in an interim role as a customer experience leader at a company, and I recruited you for a full-time role there, right? Which was a lot of fun. And it was really your passion for customers and people, which deeply resonated with me. And together, I think you'll admit, we believe in the power of that virtuous cycle. When we can get the people engaged, then we can get the customers engaged, and it'll lead to better profitability and growth. So since those early days, Joseph has taken a bold step forward. I kind of missed where your path was. So you actually started as a medical device project manager, didn't you, Joseph? Right
That
out of
is true.
college.
Yes, that
And
is true.
and then you went into the tech world,
I
2 decades at 5 separate startups and scale ups.
Yes,
All right.
5 separate ones. Quite the resume.
Yep. And so then, as an executive owning the post sale customer experience, he had teams up to 70 people, cross venture capital, private equity, and bootstrapping ventures. That experience, along with your fondness for tech startups, really led you to start your own business, Retention CX. So, I'm looking at the years now, it's been over a year already, right? Since you started that and founded that company?
Year and a half. Yes.
Excellent. And I know you've really taken your passion for the customers and focused on how to help companies retain more of their revenue that they fought so hard to retain. So, Joseph, I'm really excited to have you here today because we are always talking about leadership and leadership development and customers. And I can't wait to hear your insights. But first, I would love to hear what's your favorite season?
How did I know that question was coming? My gut is to say spring, which sounds a bit trite, but there is something about that sort of emergence from the dark times that appeals to me. Like, seeing things grow, feeling the temperature get warmer. I mean, I am like a summer person, but there's something special about springtime.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm between spring and fall. It's that weather gets to that right
Yes,
temperature. It's just a lot of fun.
agreed.
Excellent. So, Joseph, as you know, I'm a nurturing driver, right? I love to get things done by caring about others. People know my mission is to inspire and enable people. Core value, I believe no one wakes up with bad intent. So everyone shows up, I believe, truly believe in some shape or form. And one of my non-negotiables, I need constant feedback. If someone doesn't share anything, I go into oh my God, something's wrong. So that's me. But why don't you share with our audience, talk about yourself. What's your leadership style? How do you show up? What's your values?
As you well know, I love working with the nurturing types, right? Very appreciate that, but that's not me. I am very much a coach. And I think a lot of that was informed by just background and experience, right? But as I looked back, like the best experiences for me as a person inside of a business dealing with leadership was sort of that coaching and mentoring aspect to leadership, right? And that's what I've ended up really leaning into more than anything. That sort of like friendly, encouraging person who's right beside you on this journey. Um, But the part of that that I really leaned into, I think, from a coaching perspective, is this concept of like, call it growth mindedness, call it self awareness. Like, we only improve if we really understand ourselves, right? You have to know what your strengths are to lean into. You have to know what your weaknesses are to better, right? Or in some cases avoid, right? Certain jobs come with certain things that put you in a, bit of discomfort. Maybe you should avoid that. Maybe you should lean into it. But I think the key to that, a lot of that is self-awareness around that. And then it's either coaching to improve those, right? Or maybe mentoring to find a better match, right? For the things you love and are good at. But all of that requires a really close connection, right? With the person, right? With the person you're trying to assist. And so that's more than anything where I lean into. It's about getting close to the person, really understanding the individual, knowing what they like and dislike, what they're good at, what they're not, and then helping them find better fit as they go.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to ask the question because I'm guessing some of this was triggered by either your best boss or your worst boss that you've worked with in your career. So, do you have
It,
any stories about? Do you want to pick one of both and tell a story about?
I, I will do both, but I'll do it really quick. It was informed by both, right? There were some bookends in that, and the worst boss is really easy. It was a person who spent zero time being an understanding, sort of absence of nurturing, zero time understanding the individual, was all about financial metrics and movement, and quite honestly was verbally abusive about
Mm,
the input and the guidance. So it was very much, man, task management to a degree that was unpleasant. um, there were certainly some darker times in early in that relationship where I had some doubt about, is this something I need to figure out how to work with? Got some bad advice from friends on, hey, you should figure out how to work with these kinds of people. This is not uncommon for a CEO, maybe, right? And of course, through a bunch of, teamwork with others, right, figured out that no one should deal with that sort of environment. Like, that is not a good leadership style at all. So I leaned away from that heavily, and in fact, left jobs after the fact, right? That just didn't fit me in that respect. And maybe it's just not for me. I tend to think it's not for everybody, but maybe it's just not for me. But the flip side of that is, as I thought back, especially on that experience when I was going through that, is I had some really good nurturing patient leaders, right? That as I thought about it, really fell more into the coaching and mentoring, sort of framework where, like, you have a question, you have an issue, well, let's sit down and look at it. Let's talk about it. Let's think through it together. That was so informative for me. I had two specific bosses early on that were very much like that. Saw strengths in me I didn't see, right? Were able to sit down and help me fill in the blanks on things I didn't know. And so, yeah, those bookends very much informed my sort of coaching and supportive approach to leadership.
now, we talked that you were a lot in startups, right? Small companies that you look at that environment. It's go get them. You got to go fast, right? That pace is fast, but have you I think a lot of people assume, oh, you have to just be straight to the point and metrics driven, but from your experience, have you seen that some of those great bosses were in those environments where they got more done in that by being empathetic and coaching and guiding?
Yes, in fact, the best startup experience I had was exactly that, right? Where I personally grew the most. We had a leadership team that fairly bluntly and directly, sort of in a radical candor approach, shared feedback with each other. Hey, you do these things very well, and these things are very valuable to the business. And there's a subset of stuff over here that you don't do very well that we could use more of, or you should just stop doing. And we had, full disclosure, we had some outside executive coaching help to do that. But, regardless of the push for outside help, right, at some point you need to own this process. And we had a team, a core team that really subscribed to that, right, and was okay with that sort of wildly transparent relationship. The beauty of that is, is that you don't need one type of person in a business, right? And so you think of that sort of massive change that happens in those kinds of businesses. It does require a stronger team, which means different perspectives, different skills, different approaches, different styles. You can't have one type that works, and because of the very nature of that, it requires a more honest and open relationship. So I think we saw huge bounds and leaps in terms of advancing the business by having that sort of radical, open, transparent, vulnerable, in a lot of cases, like highly vulnerable relationship. I remember some really brief conversations with the CEO where he was like, "Hey, look, I get your tendency to get the things right. You need to move faster. I need you to make this decision tomorrow." And where I would tell him, like, "Hey, look, I get that you're a little vulnerable and feeling weak at this moment because maybe we're not performing, but you need to chill out a little bit and be a little more, positive with the team." Like it was that sort of really open relationship. And that does speed progress in a huge way.
Yeah, and so many people are nervous, right, about owning up to who they are and admitting that, oh, that's not my strength. That's not where I excel, so I'm going to cover it up, right?
Yes.
And I found when you actually lead with it and go, this is not my gem, this is not my zone of genius. I can adapt and I'll go there, but you're going to get a lot more from me if you help me stay in this lane or
Yes. And I think I feel like that's still a massive leadership development lesson, right, to be learned. So I'm going to lean to people like you to help us figure this out. But yes, that like it is a strength to admit you don't know and to ask questions and to ask for help. Um, how do we get more people to do that? Like, I don't care what phase of career you're in. This is not just something for leadership or executives, right? But heck, if it's your first day on the job, there's gobs of stuff you don't know, right? So of course you're going to ask questions. There is this weird tendency, though, as you theoretically become more advanced and mature in your career, that you should be asking fewer questions. I think you should be asking more questions. There's the more you know, the more you don't know, right? I think it is a strength to ask for help and ask questions. I think one of the mantras that I've taken into leadership is like, hey, it's realize yes, it is your job to get this done, but that doesn't mean that you do it, right? This whole concept of leadership is not just leadership of direct reports, but leadership through influence, right? How do I get my team to move? How do I, and that's the benefit I think of knowing the different personality types and styles is how do I ensure that I can work with my whole team to maximize the potential of all of these individuals, right? And not just assume that I have to kill myself to get things done.
yeah, because I mean, listen, you probably remember your first job where you moved from, doing the job and being the leader or the manager at the time, right? You probably like, oh, I just need to do it hyper speed. But in reality, what you really want to be doing is enabling other people, to do it themselves, right? And you're stepping back and orchestrating the whole thing as the leader.
Uh, that's my preference. So I personally feel like that is the end game for the leader, right? You should be able to create this organization that you could step out of, and it's not some Rube Goldberg house of cards that will collapse immediately if you're gone.
Yeah.
Um, I tended to find, that verbally abusive kind of approach I found in the past, that sort of task management approach, I found tended to correlate with people who felt like they were invaluable to the business, like they had to step in and make sure that things were going well. I tend to feel the opposite. Like it's my job to make sure the team can operate independently without me, whatever team that is, right? Even if it's a team of peers on a project, right? I'm going to go on vacation at some point. I may, God forbid, get sick. I may decide to leave to go for another job, right? You should be able to operate without me. There should be enough cross-functional understanding and support, right, of team members to be able to make that happen. And I know, one of my great and worst stories was like I got laid off right at the start of the pandemic. Sad part of that was I got laid off. Love that company, love the team, still friends with those people. Um, Still have ownership in, in the entity, so still pulling for them. But the reason they were able to really let me go without much downside was the team was fine. Like had hired really good people. We had great process in place. People operated effectively well together. I didn't need to be there.
Yeah.
Sad but true. Yeah.
But I think that is one of the benefits. I think the strongest leaders know that and they're driving towards that because if you set yourself up like I'm not the reason that we're here, right? And you enable everyone else. There's plenty of other things to be done, right? And I truly believe
True.
that because you've gone on to do, similar work at different places now. And so
Mm.
you can set up that process and you know how to do it, et cetera. And I think it's so important for us not to let our egos get into place and, well, I'm the only one that can do this. Life can't go on. And so,
True. Yeah. So that's back to like growth mindset, right? And being fully self-aware, knowing, and I think something that goes with that is like I've just found this to be an issue in a lot of companies around like role clarity. Um, when leaders do that, it creates an immense amount of confusion around role clarity. Like I thought you were the leader. Aren't you more like strategy and aren't I supposed to be doing the work? And aren't you more like doing strategy and making sure we're doing the work? And um, creates a lot of confusion for folks. It also, I mean, imagine just the confusion in the job, but also like if I'm thinking about where I might fit in the org, it makes it really confusing for me to understand, well, what's the next step in my career and how do I gain those skills? I just have to gain all skills. Like it creates a lot of confusion for folks.
I'm reminded of so many of our conversations. I mean, you and I have been talking almost every week for the last 3 years. So,
That's a true fact. That's true. Yes.
but role clarity is something that you and I come back to almost, 9 times out of 10 when there's a problem, something not going exactly right. We both ask ourselves, do they know what good looks like? Have we explained what the intent is? Right. And it makes a huge
Yes.
difference when
Yeah.
and it goes back to what you were saying for building trust and open conversations, right? When you have that clarity of what our roles are and our intent is to get better and we agree, it's easier to be open about it. You're not worried about, oh, what happens if I say this or what happens if I do that? Have I stepped on someone's
Yes.
toes?
Yes. As if it's entire, if it's as if it's a mystery as to what success is, right? I'm not sure. I have a client and where we started was the vice president tell me I'm having trouble holding people accountable. And my first question was accountable to what? To which this person said, well, the job. I said, but what is that? Like, can you define it? And there was a long pause. And I'm like, okay, this is the place we start. Like, people have to know what their job is and what success looks like for that role. And if you know that, then that's when I'm comfortable leaning into this coaching thing because you're coaching someone toward that.
Hmm.
And then you're finding out, like, real quickly if it's just you need to level up skills or if, like, this may not just be a fit. Right.
Yeah. Well,
But
and
there's a way
that's
to get to that.
you and I have talked about the E3 leadership code, right? First and foremost, express what the end vision is. You
Yes.
know, where are we going? Why are we going there? What does it look like when we get there, right? Who's doing what? That clarity really is the start of so much in those open dialogues. I want to take a second. I see Ralph had a
Yes.
question here. So he said, do you feel it's necessary for the leader to show their vulnerability first in order to demonstrate to the team that it's okay not to know it all?
Wow. Are you paying people for these questions, Kathy? That's a really good
I'm
question.
not.
Um, that is, I'm gonna, I don't, I'm hesitating for a second, but because my gut is to say, yes, you do. And of course, I'm immediately trying to think, like, have I done that? And I think the answer is yes. In fact, I can remember like having junior folks, and when I say junior, I mean like a year out of school folks, pull me aside and give me feedback about something they felt like I didn't do well. Now, I love people that have that bravado, like they're okay with giving the leader feedback. Like, but I would immediately go into a team meeting in the coming day or two and point that out to people. Like, FYI, I want to point out that so and so gave me some feedback. I wanted everyone to know that I got that feedback and it resonated with me. And I'm trying to get better at that. And I would like your help. Like, so yes, I think that kind of vulnerability is like I am here to get better too. Like, there's no way I'm good at everything. It's impossible, right? I'm not a fully formed entity that needs no more improvement. Like, I think that as a base level assumption is dangerous. So, Ralph, to answer your question, yes, I think you should do that from day one.
And I think, Joseph, I don't even know if you realize that you do it so naturally. And I could say this because, we were in the interview process together.
Yes.
You shared a lot in that interview process, even, right? And then when you started with your team, you're sharing who you are, what your strengths are,
True.
how to work best with you. And I think that became such a natural to you. I'm not even sure you realize that you're doing it now.
I think you're right. I think somebody asked me a question recently, like it was a leadership question around like, um, similar to probably stuff you work on, which is like, have you worked with people that are very different from you, and therefore did you struggle with that? And I was like, you know what? I really haven't thought about that in a long time because I think it's I go in with this assumption that people are different, and it's just about, hey, what's your unique style? What's your unique style? What do you like? What do you not like? What gives you energy? What drains you? And then let's find match for that, right? I think I have sort of negated any need for there to be commonality or consistency across people in terms of style. That you're right. I probably don't really think about it at all. And I'm just automatically going to, okay, here's me. Where are you? And maybe that's just I'm using myself as a model. Like, I'm like, don't be like me. Here's what I am. Here's what I'm good at, and here's what I'm not good at. So here's the bad traits about me. Like, you may fill those in with some good traits, but what are you're gonna have bad traits too. Like, what is that? And you've got to find good. Work is all about finding good match, and some of that is purpose oriented, right? Which you talk about. Some of that is just fit on skill set, right? But to not talk about all those aspects puts people in the tough position of wondering if they're on the right path, right? And so, yes, I probably just naturally try to eradicate some of that for folks.
Yeah. And, Andrew is pointing out, I assume you have some fans on here, but confirming that you lead by example, right? So you want people to share. So you're sharing naturally. So it's
Yeah,
not,
probably without thinking about it. Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. So, Joseph, I know you've moved in, well, you've always been really focused on customer experience. People are core to that. But, when you think of it, how does strong leadership translate into the customer first mindset?
Wow, that's a really good question, and I do think there are lots of analogies and parallels there, right? I think like the depth of a relationship I look for with coworkers and peers and people working with me is probably no different than the depth of a relationship I sort of enforce with the customer. I gave this real simple framework that says, like, if you work with a customer, you better understand what they're trying to achieve, right? And that's no different than a company having purpose. Like, the organization's trying to do stuff, or maybe this department, or even the person, right? Like, what are they trying to achieve? Like, and then do we have a way to help them with that? Like, what can we do? And then there's an aspect too of like, well, do we have the right people involved to be able to do that? Like, if we run our process, do we hit your goal with these people, or do we need different people? And what that does is, like, when you have that sort of simple framework that drives success, is you don't excuse yourself from that. Like it's not okay to not know what they're trying to achieve, or it's not okay to not have the right people involved and pretend like, well, we don't need a person involved at the executive level who understands the KPIs we're trying to drive. Like, it's you just have to say, like, this is not okay, right? Um, very much like you would coach someone. Like, you're not going to coach someone by not admitting that things are not in a good place, for example. Like, hey, you're not performing. There's a perception you're struggling. I think you're not doing this and this well. What's your take on that? Let's get a plan in place to make those things better. Boy, that is weirdly like exactly what you do with customers, right? I have this weird thing I say that maybe I shouldn't even say out loud, right? And if there are people I know on the call, they're going to say, yeah, he says this. Uh, I say, like, if you're going to assume anything about the customer, just for the sake of argument, assume they are dysfunctional. Like, this assumption that people are functional and have everything figured out and really don't need your help, that's the worst default position, right? Because then you're not really forging a relationship of value. Like, relationships value is where we really help each other. So yeah, I don't see how the customer relationship is any different from a working relationship inside of a business. It's just a different kind of relationship, but it should be governed in the same way.
Well, and we've been speaking so much about clarity, but it
Yeah,
starts with that, right?
of course. That's right.
As you said, what's your problem? What are you trying to solve for? It all comes down to that's going to be the theme of today, really, is around clarity, right?
Yeah,
And you get everyone on the same page. I mean, I've had customer conversations, and you know, yes, I believe the customer's always right to a certain extent. They may not have all the knowledge. So that goes back to I don't believe anyone wakes up with bad intent. They may just be on a different path than me.
correct.
And sometimes
Correct.
we have to have the difficult conversations even with our customers.
Yes. And and sometimes that difficult conversation doesn't go the way you plan, right? But I'm fond of telling people with customers, look, do you want to have the difficult conversation now or right at renewal time?
Yeah.
I'd rather have it now. And I think it's true with people as well, right? Like, back to leadership, like, I'd rather have that conversation earlier and give someone a shot at success than delay, right? A difficult conversation. I think it's harder to have a conversation around, geez, we have to put you on a performance plan because it's not going well. And we're going to have some very specific things and we don't think you can do this. And you have 90 days. And that's to me much less comfortable than like having an earlier conversation around like, I'm here to help. I see these deficits. What do you see? How do we make this better? I don't know. I'm all for the earlier conversation, right?
Yeah, no, I agree, and it's interesting knowing you're so involved with companies, helping them with that customer success and retaining their revenue and stuff like that. It really is. You don't want to wait to that last minute and find out, oh, they're not renewing, right? It's the whole point is to get in earlier to understand where something's going off course, find a way to correct, give that guidance and get them. So it's a
Yes.
win-win, right?
I've seen this a lot over the course of the years where there are all these whisperings, right, among sometimes executives and peers about a certain person. And then you'll ask, like, well, did anyone talk to the person about these issues? These, even if they're just perceptions, like, and a lot of times it's like, no, we haven't talked to that person yet. And I think, well, that's the first step, right? Like leaning into that conversation and having it earlier rather than later.
Yep. Agreed. Going back through one of the questions, we keep coming back to that clarity. Who's responsible for providing that clarity? Is it HR? Is it the leaders? What's your thoughts?
Maybe that depends a little bit on size of company, right? I think the smaller the company, that's the CEO's job,
Mm,
right? I think to provide the what I think we'd probably think of as the purpose, right? So sort of vision and the why, right? Every company should have a vision, a purpose, a reason they exist. And I don't even, we haven't talked much about authenticity today, but like I don't think anybody really cares. I think there's this, maybe perception that you shouldn't just say like, I don't know, we're here to make money. If you're a CEO and that's why your company exists, to make money, I think it's okay to say that. Like you're being authentic. And you know what will happen is you will attract people that have the same purpose that want to make money. And that's okay. Then at least you have an authentic culture. Even if it's a culture most people would go like, maybe cringe from, that's okay. It's your culture. The discordancy comes from like, pretending you're one thing when you're really something else, right? So I think for a smaller firm, the CEO has to articulate that reason as to why they exist. I think in a larger firm, you're going to get business units that maybe operate a bit independently, have slightly different reasons. So I'd look to the leaders of those business units to set that tone. I think Carrie asked in that question, like, is it HR? And I think maybe the answer is no. Um, I do think it's a job of leadership, like if that doesn't exist, to fill the void, right? And maybe that's you talking to your supervisor and a
yeah,
higher up executive to say, hey, we need some clarity around vision here so we know what we're doing. Um, so I
yeah,
think leadership owns it in that respect for sure. In terms of if there's a void, we need to fill it, for sure. Like,
yeah. And I
if
think
that,
I challenge that. I think it's everyone's responsibility,
well, that's true. Yeah.
right? I think it starts with the CEO on what the purpose of the business is, and it cascades down. And as you're talking, I'm like, well, actually, it's every individual,
Mhm.
right? Like, if you don't know, you have the responsibility to ask. What does success look like?
I That's a fabulous point, right? To me, that okay, that's the takeaway of the session is like if you don't know what the purpose is in your business, you should be asking the question, right? Like, I don't really understand why we exist, or because I think you're right. I think for people, like back to this role clarity thing, like people don't work for money. Like I think we know enough today for that to be true, right? They work because they want to contribute, they want to feel like they have purpose. Well, if you don't know what the purpose is, how do you feel like you're contributing, right? That's why so many people, I think, feel disconnected in their work from the outcome because it's not well defined. So, yes, every individual should be asking that question. Kathy, well said.
I think we're going to leave it on that one, Joseph, because
That's a
we're
good one.
at the bottom of the hour. So I think, when I look at today, I'm going to ask you one more question.
Sure.
What advice do you have for, a leader that's, really trying to make a difference in their business?
I think lean into that, what you might see as the uncomfortable conversations, right? And I see that two ways. I think it's opening, if you have a team, right? If you're leading a team, opening yourself up to that team for feedback. Like, I think that is probably a primary thing to do. Like, if you're self aware and you're knowledgeable, great, then get some help for those things. But if you're wondering what you're doing well and how it's landing with people, ask.
Mm,
Show some vulnerability and ask, and do that with your you know your boss and your supervisory folks as well. Like, I think step one for me for anybody would be ask for some feedback, ask for peers, ask from reports, ask from leadership. How am I doing? How could I get better? Right? Those are questions of some power.
yeah. I agree. That's my constant feedback, right? Tell me,
Yep.
I don't
Yes.
know if you don't tell me. And, and also, I got to go back to one thing you said earlier of asking questions and things like that and admitting you don't know something. As a manager or a leader, that's the greatest gift you can give me. When you ask questions, it helps me understand. Do you get it? Do you understand? Or am I speaking a different language?
Yeah.
I speak a different language a lot, I've learned. So I'm always encouraging people to ask because I thought I explained it, but I
Yeah, it's
didn't.
good. It's like the mantra of like, and it's a tired cliche, right? But there's no stupid questions. But it's true. It's very true.
Yeah, agreed. Well, Joseph, thank you so much. I've taken so many nuggets away as I do almost every time we chat. But, self awareness is a superpower, the growth mindset, having clarity, knowing, what's expected, and lean into the difficult conversations. I think those are the leaders that really succeed, that they're willing to do that. So thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. And if for the audience, if you've enjoyed this, we hope you'll check out our other interviews. I'm hoping, Joseph, you'll come back because I think you and I could speak for hours upon end. And
Of course. Yes, I would love to.
excellent. And you can follow us and subscribe to our newsletter. And we're actually doing a webinar next Tuesday. So if anyone would like to join us, we're going to talk about how to help leaders develop, whether it's formal leadership developments, but even things that leaders can do that don't cost a lot of money to help elevate leaders. So we hope we'll see you again soon. Joseph, thank you again and have a great weekend.
Thanks all. Bye.